bit of a turn. Hello and welcome back to Sage and Stone Homestead. If you have not met me yet, my name is Heather. This is my greenhouse. I have been growing in here for a few years, but this is really my first full season growing in all of these raised beds that you see behind me. We have a total of 15 raised beds in here, and the soil is relatively new. I have grown quite a few things in this greenhouse, but I have had my fair share of issues with some of the things that have grown in my greenhouse. We have had a measure of success, but last year, for example, we had aphids and whiteflies galore, to the point where I barely got any kind of harvest for the amount of space that I'm growing in. So we actually recently just harvested all of the onions out of the greenhouse. I had 4 of these 6-foot by 3-foot beds planted full of onions, and the onions were a smashing success. But at this point, I don't really know what's going on in the soil. I want to make sure that I don't have a repeat of the issues that I had last year. It's pretty well proven that if you have too much nitrogen in your soil and the plants take up that nitrogen, that it's the excess nitrogen in the soil that can really attract the pests like aphids and whiteflies, and I don't want to repeat that. So before I amend these beds to plant again, we're going to use the rapid test soil test. You can probably tell I've got some supplies out here. This actually isn't going to be an instant thing. Oh wow, look, an onion. Go figure. But this does take a little bit of time. Not that the test takes a little bit of time, but the first thing I need to do is take a soil sample, dilute it with water, and then allow the sample to settle. So it's evening time now, and I'm just going to put this sample together and let it settle overnight, and we'll do our test tomorrow morning. Now, they suggest that you do not use your hands, so I'm just using this cup that I have here. I imagine that skin cells, or I don't know, could affect the reading. I'm digging down about 4 inches because that is a suggestion. That's where the majority of the root growth is, so that's where we're going to be making sure the nutrients are optimal. And I need about a cup of material. Oop, without a word. We'll put him back. Now my soil is quite woody. There's a lot of wood chips. I do have, oh my gosh, that poor worm. I do have mulch on the top of these beds that is pretty well broken down. I'll try not to include that, but honestly, I really want to be honest about what's going on at the level of the roots for my plants. So, I mean, if there's some woody material, so be it. There's a lot of worms. So this here is what the soil looks like down in the bed. Look, I do not remember throwing onions over here. What the heck happened? I guess we'll go put these poor, sad, neglected onions where they belong and then resume our test. So as you can see, despite not knowing fully what's going on in my soil, we had a not half bad onion harvest this year. This here is most of the onions that we harvested. I have preserved 1 bed's worth of onions. Many more to preserve, as you can see. I actually just freeze-dried a whole bunch of caramelized onions and canned some as well. If you follow our weekly vlogs, that's coming up this Friday. But we'll get those out of the way so that we can continue with the soil test. Now, I think one of the reasons, honestly, that it's taking me so long to do something like this is they suggest that you use distilled water. We have a water filter, but it's not distilled water. And I think the reason that this is important is that you don't want something like a mineral content of your water to cause like a false reading for what's actually going on in your soil. This is, you know, neutral, and so we're going to be getting a soil reading rather than a soil plus water reading. So we have about a cup of soil. Now they do say you can scale this up or down, but you want to keep the ratio to the same, which is a 1 to 5. 1 part soil, 5 parts water, distilled water. So I'll go, okay. I'm sure that wasn't the most exact thing, the way that I just did it, because obviously there's air pockets within the soil, but we're gonna call this okay. And I'm gonna mix it up. They suggest that you mix for about a minute. Of course, I'm gonna make a mess. That'll be all right. Good soup. Alrighty, now this is the point where we let it sit and let it settle. They say that some soils, especially a more clay type variety, might take a little bit longer to settle out. Anywhere from about an hour to 24 hours. I'll see you back here in the morning. Hello, we are back. It is the next day, and I don't know if it's going to come up on camera super well. There is settling, there is some cloudiness, so I had waited the full 24 hours, and it's still a little cloudy. The directions say that that's fine, so let us proceed. We're going to start with the nitrogen. That is one that I'm very interested to see where we're at. So this is called the comparator, according to the kit, and we've got these little capsules that are the corresponding color. So we need to use these capsules to figure out exactly where our nitrogen is at. I'm going to pop off the top. I want to fill this side of the comparator with our sample. They've provided a neat little dropper. We can suck up our sample, and again, they did say that it's fine if it's a little cloudy, which is good because that's what we're working with. Okay, just up to that dotted line there. All right, so inside this little capsule is the solution that's going to react with the water and give us our results. Whoop. Okay, stick the cap back on. There we go. Shake it up. All right, so I've shaken it thoroughly, and now I need to let it sit for 10 minutes, but no more, and then we will read it. All right, so this is what we're looking at. To me, it looks like it's between adequate and deficient. Remember, there is a little bit of cloudiness here, but I definitely see some purpling. And then for the phosphorus, it's kind of greenish, less blue. It does say if some of the blue particles settle, to shake it up and then do your reading. Huh. It's hard to tell because it's green.
It's either 0 or 1.
This one is a little bit easier to tell. I think we're sufficient here. This is the potash or potash. And we look like we're probably sufficient with that. There's also a disturbing number of worms, like not the earthworm type.
Yeah.
So this is a little bit harder to tell what's going on than I thought. I thought it would be a little bit easier to tell, but the colors that are here aren't like an exact match for the colors that are on the chart, likely because we do have some sediment, but it's quite orange. Like if you look at the back here, that's got quite a bit of color. So to me, that's reading as accurate. This is decently blue here, right? And so I don't think we're necessarily in the depleted range for phosphorus. Nitrogen is the lighter one, but see, it's like quite purpley pink. So I don't think we're depleted in anything, but possibly deficient, which wouldn't surprise me because I have not amended that particular bed that we pulled the sample from since I filled it last fall. And I grew some broccoli in it over the fall and winter. And then I did amend it with just sulfur for my onions. And then we planted onions in it and got a nice harvest. I wish that it was more super clear, but because of this reading, I am confident in just putting down some bone meal and some blood meal, because the blood meal is going to help boost our nitrogen and the bone meal is going to help boost our phosphorus, and that's what it looks like my space needs. One of the things that this test comes with, which I really appreciate, is a little chart that shows you how to amend your soils based on your test results. So I am deficient in some phosphorus, for example. It has some suggestions of different phosphorus fertilizers that I can use. It says that I can put down a 19% bone meal. This is 7%. It's a little bit less than what I may need. It also has the synthetic thing that you could use if you wanted, and if we have depleted soils, I put down 14 ounces of that per 100 square feet. So my beds are 3 feet by 6 feet. 3 times 6 is 18, so it would be 18 square feet. So we would put down not that much, honestly, to bring it up. And so this is really good information to know. I can fiddle around with some of the fertilizers and things that I have to bring things up to balance. But also, what I'd really like to be able to do is use a lot of our manures and things to help not only amend the beds but fill them up a little bit, because over the course of the last couple seasons the levels of the beds have really gone down, and instead of buying in purchased soils, which I have done a lot of in the past just to fill the beds as quickly as possible, I would really like to be able to clean up my barn and utilize the goat's manure and rabbit manures and things in the garden. And very frequently manures are higher in nitrogen, but it looks like I might need that, so it might just work out and hopefully we won't have an issue. It does say that you should retest your soil 30 days after applying your fertilizer. So that could be a real interesting test to amend with some of my barn cleanouts and things and see where that puts us, if that puts us way over the edge or if it brings us more in balance. One thing that I really do want to talk about though is there are a disturbing number of what looks like worms, and not the earthworm kind, that have like emerged from this soil. And now I did put down beneficial nematodes in these beds early in the year, so I guess that's kind of an amendment, but I really put it down as more of like a balancer to try to stave off things like grubs that could be in the soil. I don't know if you can visibly see those later on in their life cycle. When you first spray them down, it's just this powder that you put in water and you shake it up and spray it down, and I don't know, this is a lot. Can you see these white threads? Maybe we'll try to pour it out so you can see it better, but you can see them on top too, like this here, that, like, remember this was 1 cup of soil. So I just ran inside and did a quick Google, which obviously is not thorough research, but it looks like beneficial nematodes, you're not gonna see them with the naked eye. They're in that powder and then they disperse through the soil and they don't show up as like worms like that. But there are soil-borne helminths, they're called, or worms that can be parasitic to people. Many of you who follow the channel know where I'm going with this, but I did have a worm infection and my suspect was that it was from the garden. And I think that maybe we're getting some evidence to say that that could be true. But if you wanted to see if maybe your garden soil potentially could be harboring something interesting like that, I don't know the types of worms that those are or anything, but I do know that all it took was 24-hour soak in some water, and I don't know if they hatched or became more visible, not sure, but there was a lot in that little sample. Very interesting. And don't let things like that scare you. Things like that are more prevalent than we realize. There's a whole microscopic world out there that is very, very numerous, much more numerous than people on this earth. And I think it's something that we need to be aware of for sure, but not necessarily be scared of. Learn how to work with these things, keep them in check when they need to be kept in check. Yeah, this video took a little bit of a turn from the direction I really had with it, but it was enlightening for me. I didn't really know what to expect out of my soil sample. I really did think that there was going to be a lot of excess nitrogen still, and there is something to note too. I mentioned that my soil does have some woody parts in it still. When those woody bits, like this wood mulch here that I use in my garden, as these break down, as these wood parts break down, they are going to be utilizing the nitrogen out of the soil in order to break themselves down. So there still could be like hidden nitrogen essentially in my soil that's currently tied up in some of the woody bits, and then once those woody bits are break down, the nitrogen is released into the soil. And so sometimes it's a little bit hard to find a balance, but I think being able to at least take a snapshot of the soil and where it is exactly right now is really helpful for me as a gardener personally, and hopefully all this was helpful for you as well.